Forest is the first new community to be built on the North Shore in 100 years. Fort Sheridan developed with not a little controversy after the base closed in 1993. Each town bordering Fort Sheridan was interested in how the land would develop and who would get the lucrative tax revenues. Lake Forest bowed out of the deal after being assured that the land on its border would become property of the Forest Preserve District, including 190 acres for a golf course and the lakefront bluffs. Highland Park and Highwood split the rest between them. They set strict zoning and historic preservation standards to protect the 145-acre National Historic Landmark District on the grounds. Lakefront officers' houses were restored. Barracks became condos. The stables are now townhomes. Fort Sheridan home prices range from $220,000 to $2 million. The history of Fort Sheridan can be traced to the Haymarket Riot of 1886. It was a time of tremendous labor unrest in Chicago. After the riot, nervous Chicago industrialists called in the army for protection, and they were shocked to find out that the nearest troops were in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Business leaders wanted a permanent military presence closer to Chicago. The elite Commercial Club of Chicago bought the land and donated it to the federal government. The 1st Regiment arrived at the fort on November 8, 1887, just 3 days before the execution of the Haymarket anarchists. At first, the fort was called the Camp at Highwood, but it was renamed for General Philip Sheridan, a Civil War veteran who kept the peace in Chicago after the Great Fire of 1871. The young architects Holabird and Roche were hired to design the fort. They would become renowned builders of Chicago's famous skyscrapers, but this was their first big commission. It probably didn't hurt that Holabird's father was responsible for hiring the fort's architect. The cream-colored bricks used in the Romanesque-style buildings were made on-site from local clay. The barracks are uniform and Spartan. Officers' houses increase in size based on rank. The soaring water tower and parade grounds provide space for military pomp and ceremony. The tower's arched base is large enough for a marching platoon. The fort was used for its intended purpose exactly once, when President Grover Cleveland ordered troops from Fort Sheridan to deter labor unrest at the Union stockyards after the 1894 Pullman strike. Fort Sheridan's soldiers fought in Cuba during the Spanish-American War, and Lakota Indians were imprisoned there after the Battle of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. Cavalry officers were glamorous characters, and the post became a social hub on the North Shore, hosting balls and receptions at the Officers' Club. The fort's 20th century mission was mostly recruitment and training, but Nazi prisoners of war were interred at Fort Sheridan during World War II. In fact, Fort Sheridan administered prisoner of war camps all over Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where a total of 15,000 German prisoners of war worked in civilian construction jobs and harvested crops. The fort controlled Nike missiles during the Cold War and sent soldiers into battle in Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf War. It was closed as part of military downsizing in 1993. We're in Highwood now, just south of Fort Sheridan, and for about 100 years, this was one of the only places on the North Shore where you could do this without getting arrested. Cheers! Fort Sheridan gets a large part of the credit, or the blame, for Highwood's reputation. It was once a burgeoning railroad suburb. Its leading citizen was the prominent architect of Chicago's famous water tower, W.W. Boyington. But when the fort opened, Highwood changed its name to Fort Sheridan Village and approved the sale and consumption of alcohol. According to historian Michael Ebner, Highwood's trustees claimed that this was the only way to get control over the many illegal drinking establishments catering to soldiers. There were feeble attempts to clean up the town's image. In fact, in 1904 it changed its name back to Highwood. That didn't change the fact that there was one bar for every 80 residents compared to 1 in 250 for Chicago. In 1905, Mayor/tavern owner Michael Gibbs went on a reform bender. He closed down a local brothel and he banned gambling in bars. Shortly after he made that pronouncement, a local minister showed up at Gibbs Tavern with members of the Northwestern University football team and had the mayor himself arrested for allowing gambling in his own bar. Italian immigrants started moving to Highwood in the late 1800s. They were stonemasons and gardeners in the old country and found plenty of work building and landscaping North Shore mansions. According to a local historian, the Italians also made their own wine. Before long, some local Italian restaurants opened up, and the rest is history. To this day, many consider Highwood the restaurant capital of the North Shore. There are dozens of restaurants packed into a few blocks. Many have been passed from one generation to the next. Today, Highwood continues to be a port of entry for new immigrants. The town now has a large Hispanic population, and the development of Fort Sheridan has sparked a boom in real estate values. If you go a few miles west of Highwood on Half Day Road, you'll cross the Des Plaines River at about the place where the very first non-native settler in Lake County built his log cabin in 1834. Daniel Wright had been a captain in the Vermont militia and fought in the War of 1812. Potawatomis helped him build his home near their village. He called the settlement Half Day. Now, most people on the North Shore will tell you the road and the settlement were named because they were a half-day's journey from Chicago. Not so, according to the Lake County Discovery Museum's Diana Dretsky. They were named in honor of Indian chief Aptekisik, who lived nearby. Aptekisik's name is a Native American word for middle of the sky or half day. He apparently got his name because he performed a task in half a day that would take an ordinary person an entire day to complete. He spoke eloquently against the treaty that banished his people from the area. Ultimately, his words fell on deaf ears. Daniel Wright died at age 95 in 1873. This rock, which used to mark the spot where his cabin stood, was moved in the 1990s here to Ryerson Woods, west of Deerfield. This was once the vacation retreat of Edward L. Ryerson, chairman of Ryerson Steel. He and his friends built rustic cabins here. Today, it's a 550-acre forest preserve. The Ryerson's Greek Revival mansion from 1942 is now the Visitors Center.